this lesson, we're going to learn how to subtract mixed numbers where you have to borrow. So it is kind of a difficult lesson. It's one of the hardest ones probably for fifth graders to figure out. First things first, we always got to make sure the bottom numbers or the denominators are the same, because you can't add or subtract without it. In this case, they are, so we don't even have to do common denominators. But if I look at the subtraction here, I can't take 3/4 away from 1/4. So that means I got to borrow. I'm going to take 1 from the whole number column. So that'll become a 2, just like we do when we're subtracting decimals or whole numbers. Now it's important that that one whole, in this case, is 4/4. Okay? Now when we bring this one whole over into the fraction column, we bring 4/4 over here to 1/4. How many fourths would I have altogether? Well, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths here, and one more fourth here would make it 5 total fourths. Now, a shortcut that we have learned as well is if you just add the denominator in the numerator, 4 plus 1, you get 5 as well. Okay, so now that I've borrowed and I brought over my one whole, or 4/4, now I can subtract this. 5 minus 3 is 2/4. And 2 wholes minus 1 whole is 1. Now we need to reduce this because 2 goes into both of these. So my final answer on this one would be 1.5. Okay, well now what happens if we have one like this where the denominators aren't the same? So very first rule when you add or subtract fractions, first rule is always you have to have common denominators. So we got to do that first. So both 3 and 6 can go into 6. So I'm going to make these into 6s, just like we did on all of our other fraction problems. 6 times 1 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 2 is 6. I got to do the same to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. Alright, so now that I have those converted to 6, now I can see if I can subtract them. Can I take 2 away from 1? I can't, so I borrow. I take 1 from the whole numbers column. That would become 8. Now instead of fourths, now we're talking about sixths on the bottom. So 1 whole, remember, would be 6/6. If I bring over 6/6 to join with this 1/6, I would have 7/6 combined. Or do the little trick of adding the denominator and the numerator, and you get 7/6. Okay. Now if I subtract it, 7 minus 2 is 5/6. And our whole number's 8 minus 2 is 6. So our answer would be 6 and 5/6. Now, sometimes you'll have this, where you take a mixed number away from a whole number. And kids get crossed up all the time. They think nothing minus 2/5 would just be 2/5, but that's not true. You can't take 2/5 away from nothing, so we have to borrow. That becomes a 7. Now this one whole I'm going to bring over has to have the same bottom number. It has to have a 5 on the bottom. So if I'm bringing over one whole and the bottom number has to be 5, so fifths, how many fifths do I bring over for one whole? Well, that would be 5/5. 7 and 5/5 is the same as 8. Now I can subtract it. 5/5 minus 2/5 is 3/5. And 7 minus 3 in the whole number column would be 4. That's a lesson on how to subtract mixed numbers if you have to borrow.